Hi, this is Giovanni Di Stefano again to give a very quick update on the situation. 2 days ago, I received information from investigators that I'd commissioned in the Principality of Monaco to examine certain files there. And we came back with a substantive file on Mr. Craig Whyte, which included an investigation, a fairly serious investigation from 2006 into money laundering, share scams, into insider dealings, into fraudulent preferences, fraudulent schemes, and that's an investigation that has been ongoing since 2006 from the Principality of Monaco, from France, from Costa Rica and the United States of America, where things are not going to be quite so easy as in the United Kingdom or other European Union countries. Now, in June of this year, the Crown Office sent a request to the Strathclyde Fraud Squad to investigate independently the whole situation of the Rangers Football Club PLC takeover of Mr. Whyte. We must remember, of course, that everybody is innocent until they are proven guilty. But on the face of it, what it seems to me, and what is very, very suggestive, and there's evidence of that, is that the Scottish Football Association were certainly aware that there was an investigation into Mr. Whyte. The Scottish Ministry of Justice were aware of that as well, because there had been some requests for assistance and for some surveillance and that. So that's normal, incidentally, whenever one has a person in one jurisdiction and a fraud is perpetrated in a number of other jurisdictions. They're called letters of request. In the old days, they used to be called rogatoires. Now, I wrote a letter on the 24th, that's yesterday, to Duff and Phelps, and I put to them that they were aware of this, and even if they were not, they should have been aware as professional advisors. They advised on all matters. There's evidence that they were certainly with Mr. Whyte for a period of 18 months, 2 years, perhaps even longer, before the acquisition. There's evidence also of enormous pressure applied by Sir David Murray to the SFA in ensuring that a deal would go through, simply because Mr. Whyte had found a way of paying the Lloyds Bank debt. And I wrote the article, of course. At the time I didn't have the file, but I was aware of the contents of that, but I didn't actually have it. The situation then arose whereby Mr. Whyte says that Lloyds Bank promised him a facility, and on that issue I do believe him, because banks do behave in that fashion. There are a number of companies that I've heard from since who tell a similar story. They say, pay off the loan and we will give you an overdraft facility. Of course, a loan is at 2%, an overdraft facility is at 18%. They're not stupid banks, they're just they are legal thieves. But there you have it. You know, the government promotes that, the government allows that, and there's nothing that we can do about that there. I also wrote to the Scottish Premier League and put to them, in very precise terms, that they were aware of the situation, and since they were aware of the situation, then it's only right and proper that they must assume some of the responsibility, and we can't have Rangers Football Club being penalised for contributory negligence, or a situation where the SFA and the Scottish Government have effectively contributed to a situation on the demise of the club. Now, on the question of insolvency, what's interesting to note is that Lord Hodge, in his judgment on the 23rd of March, and incidentally, for heaven's sake, the administrators even couldn't get the administration right. There was a fault with the administration on Valentine's Day. They had to go back to court and get a retrospective order. That's another issue altogether, which, you know, I will ultimately address. But this is what Lord Hodge says about the solvency of the club. It says that the Rangers Football Club was or was likely to be unable to pay its debts when due. Well, that's not insolvent. That's a far cry. Everybody, it's a possibility that all of us can't pay when a bill is due. Doesn't mean you're insolvent or bankrupt. Doesn't mean you have to call the administrators. Doesn't mean you have to file bankruptcy. But it's an indication as to how things have been allowed to develop. Now, here we come the question of the injunction. I do not believe it's in the interests of the shareholders, and which I am one, or the supporters of Rangers Football Club, for me to go to court, get an injunction, which is possible. It's for, it's always a possibility. The elements are there of serious doubt on what has occurred. But what will we achieve? We will achieve stopping Scottish football. Hasn't that already been put into disrepute by the SFA, by Whyte, and all the other people there? Is that something that is necessarily good? Why should the other clubs leave aside the Celtics, the Dundees, the Dunfermlys, look at the other clubs. There's a great potential that they would ultimately lose out as well. And I don't think that the spirit of Rangers Football Club is about vendetta or about vengeance and making everybody else pay. I think we have to sort this out and that. So I've suggested to Mr. Reagan the correct approach here is for some form or other, it doesn't matter whether it's Sevco, or in some way or another, Rangers must play football at a proper standard. In other words, on the basis that the SPL, for example, can easily admit, even at this stage, Dunfermline and Rangers to play in the SPL. Because let me tell you, the whole question of the Sky money is very much in doubt, especially with recent developments that have occurred within the organisation. They're not going to be quite so willing to have disputes and get lawyers involved into something that is effectively a sport. So I'm going to think very carefully about the position there. But one thing is for certain, the people who created this situation have to resolve it so that there is a status quo, and that's not the pop group. There is a status quo, and that football has to get back to football, not about courts and allegations and criminal trials. That's all a byproduct of this stupidityness that has occurred simply because there was a rush to sell this club. David Murray had run out of money or didn't want to put any more money, and he's lost enough, the poor guy. There's no evidence whatsoever that Mr. Murray knew that Craig Whyte was under investigation. There's every evidence that the SFA knew. There's every evidence that the Scottish Government were aware of that. By those two bodies allowing Mr. Whyte to acquire the club and Lloyds Bank lying, because let's call it mendacity, let's be a little polite, lying though, that is what it substantially it is, to Whyte and saying, you pay off this overdraft, this loan, and we will give you an overdraft, and then reneging on that, that of course is quite unforgivable. That's what's happened. In the meantime, Mr. Whyte is free for the moment because the investigation is coming to an end and there'll be a conclusion to that. So I'm going to think very carefully whether I'm going to go for an injunction or whether I'm just going to be an interested party in the proceedings and try and protect the interests of this club for the shareholders and supporters. Thank you.